My daughter-in-law posted a TikTok calling me that washed-up farm hag at the exact moment I was lying motionless on the operating table. Sounds unbelievable, but it's the truth. September 15th, 2024. I was in room 314 at Opelika General Hospital in Alabama, my body fresh out of a heart surgery that nearly killed me. My son, Malik, kept pacing the hallway, his face drawn tight with fear. And Simone, my daughter-in-law, sat curled up in the corner of the room, holding up her iPhone 15 Pro Max as if she were in her own private studio. "Day 3 of being free from that miserable farm," she whispered into the camera, her voice buzzing with excitement. Harriet finally passed out. Now I can tell the truth about our life upgrade plan. I closed my eyes. Not because I was exhausted, but because I wanted to hear how far she would go. Simone thought I couldn't hear a thing. What she didn't know was that one sentence alone had already lit the fuse of the worst thing that would ever happen in her life. What Simone never understood about that worthless farm she kept mocking is that it's the one thing about to flip her entire future upside down and drag the whole Radford family with it. But for you to understand the ending, you first need to know where this story truly begins. If you want to know what lies beneath the red soil of Alabama and why Simone just crossed a line she never should have touched, keep listening. Every secret will surface soon enough. And trust me, it's far more brutal than you think. Simone Radford married my son 3 years ago. And from the very moment she stepped into our home, she looked at our family farm as if it were some kind of contagious social disease. No one should ever touch Dunley Farm spans 200 acres in Opelika, Alabama, about a 2-hour drive from Atlanta. This land has belonged to my family since 1924, almost a full century. The farmhouse was built in 1952, the same year I was born. Not luxurious, not glamorous, but it was the nest that raised every Dunley child into adulthood. But to Simone, it was something else entirely. "This isn't a home," she told Malik after her very first night there. "This is a museum displaying poverty." Simone came from what she proudly called a long-money family. Her parents, Ernest and Claudia Radford, once owned a small vineyard on the outskirts of Atlanta. But that word "once" is the important part. They lost everything in the financial crisis of 2008. Still, Simone carried herself like a queen untouched by downfall. She drove a BMW X7 worth $89,000. On her arm hung a Hermes Kelly bag priced at $12,500. Her wardrobe was nothing but designer pieces, each one costing more than most people's monthly salary. And me? I still drove my 1987 Ford F-150, on its best day worth maybe $8,200. I wore an $89 Carhartt jacket that could last 20 years, and luxury to me meant dinner at Opelika Diner, where a cup of coffee was still $1.50. Simone couldn't understand that lifestyle, but she also never bothered trying. And here's the part most people wouldn't expect. Simone saw an old, worn-out farm, but I saw my entire life and the values my husband built for decades. She only saw the outside, never realizing what lay beneath, and that blindness was about to cost her dearly. But to understand everything, you need to know about the man who turned this land into the foundation of the entire Dunley family. My husband, Thomas Dunley. Thomas passed away in 2019 before Malik ever met Simone. She never met him, never knew the man who built the very foundation she was now standing on. Thomas and I married in 1975. He was 24 and I was 23. He inherited the farm from his father, 200 acres of cotton and soybeans. But back then, the farm was struggling. Outdated equipment, depleted soil, and debt stacked higher than our hopes. I still remember a June evening in 1976. We were sitting at the old kitchen table, the hand-carved wood one Thomas's grandfather built, with a mountain of bills piled between us. "Harriet," Thomas sighed, exhaustion weighing down his voice. "Everyone says we should sell the land, move to the city, get stable jobs. I held his hand. "What do you really want?" Thomas looked out the window, eyes drifting toward the wide field stretching beyond the house. "You already know what I want. I want to build something. Not just for us, but for the children who'll come after us." "But," he paused, his voice softening, "is it selfish?" I shook my head no. "You're not selfish. You have vision, and vision takes time." So we worked like two determined lunatics. Thomas woke at 4 in the morning and worked until 10 at night. I handled accounting during the day, then joined him in the fields in the evening. We had no vacations, no luxuries. Every penny we made went right back into the land. In 1982, we switched to organic farming, an idea the whole town thought was ridiculous. "You think anyone's going to pay for tomatoes without pesticides?" The neighbors laughed. But Thomas saw farther than all of them. "One day, people will care about what they're eating, Harriet. And when that day comes, we'll be ready." He was completely right. By 1995, Whole Foods began buying our produce. Then other organic chains called. Revenue climbed so fast, even we couldn't believe it. But Thomas never changed his simple lifestyle. "Harriet," he'd say, "people don't need to know how much money we have. They just need to know who we are." In 2003, we began buying properties. A foreclosed home in Opelika, then another, then an apartment building. Thomas managed everything through small holding companies, so no one knew that the farmer driving the old pickup truck actually owned nearly half the rental properties in town. "Why keep it secret?" I once asked. "It's not secrecy," Thomas replied. "It's protection. When people know you have money, they treat you differently. Some want to use you, some resent you, and the ones who treat you fairly, there aren't many." That was Thomas's greatest lesson to me. Real value isn't in showing off. It's in building quietly. When Thomas passed, he left me an empire worth $52 million. No one knew, not even Malik. Thomas wanted our son to stand on his own 2 feet. "Malik needs to learn how to measure value," he said during his final days. "Not through money, but through character. Let him discover his own way." I honored that wish. Malik grew up on the farm, worked from childhood, learned the worth of labor. He earned a scholarship to the University of Georgia, became an engineer, and built a stable life in Atlanta with a $75,000 salary. I was proud of my son. And I knew. Thomas would have been too, but life rarely lets peace linger for long. Malik was grown, steady, grounded, and then fate brought Simone into his life. And that was when the first cracks began to form, cracks I didn't see right away. And then Malik met Simone. Malik met Simone at a networking event in Atlanta in 2020. She was working in marketing at the time, trying to build her career as an influencer. "Mom, I met someone," Malik called me, his voice bright like early summer sunshine. "I think you're going to like her." The first time Simone set foot on our farm was December 2020. I remember it vividly. She opened the door of her BMW, stepped out in an Alexander McQueen dress and bright red Louboutin heels. She stood in the yard, looking around as if she'd just been escorted into some kind of strange exhibit. "Ms. Harriet!" she exclaimed, wearing a smile so bright it felt forced. "It's so charming here." Charming, the word city people use when they want to say outdated without sounding rude. That evening, I cooked Southern-style fried chicken using my grandmother's recipe. Simone took a tiny bite, then pushed the plate aside. "Ms. Harriet, I'm doing low carb right now. Do you have a salad?" Malik looked at me, then at her, uneasy. "Simone, my mom spent the whole afternoon cooking that." "Oh, I know, and I really appreciate it," Simone said, though her voice carried no warmth. "It's just, I have to maintain my image for Instagram." After dinner, while Malik was washing dishes in the kitchen, I saw Simone quietly slip into the living room. She lifted her phone and snapped photos of the old sofa, the worn rug, then the family pictures on the mantel. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked. She startled for a second, but quickly flashed her bright smile again. "Oh, just capturing memories, Miss Harriet. This place has such a real vintage vibe." That night, after they left, I opened Simone's Instagram. Sure enough, she had posted a photo of my living room with the caption, "Visiting the countryside. Sometimes you gotta step back in time to appreciate modern life. #rustic life, #farmhouse, #simplicity." The comments underneath were full of laughing emojis and lines like, "Girl, how do you survive? That's not rustic. That's just sad." I didn't say a word. Not to Malik, not to Simone. Thomas used to tell me, "Give people enough rope. The good ones will climb. The bad ones will hang themselves." So that's exactly what I chose to do. Observe. The first signs are always small, faint, easy to ignore, if you want to believe the best. But dust always rises before the storm rolls in. I just didn't know yet that Simone wasn't just kicking up dust. She was getting ready to blow the entire foundation of my family apart. Simone and Malik married in June 2021. The wedding was lavish, held in Atlanta. Total cost, $45,000. I quietly paid for all of it through Malik. No boasting, no announcement. Simone believed her parents had borrowed money left and right to give her the wedding of her dreams. After the wedding, Simone's social media career entered a whole new level. At first, it was just innocent Instagram stories about visiting the countryside, farmhouse aesthetic, harmless little snippets. But over time, her tone shifted, sharper, more mocking, stripped of every trace of respect. "Y'all see this?" she said in one TikTok, pointing her camera straight at our kitchen. "My mother-in-law still uses a rotary phone, literally from the Stone Age." Comments flooded in immediately. "Girl, you're slumming it. How do you survive without Starbucks? That's not rustic. That's just poverty." I sat alone in my room, opening each video, reading each comment. Some were even crueler than what Simone herself said. Every time I read them, it felt like someone carving deeper into my chest with a blade. But still, I stayed silent. By March 2022, Simone launched a new series called Generational Poverty Diaries. In each video, she dissected every detail of my home as if she were examining an ancient artifact. A video about my collection of agricultural magazines. Hoarding behavior. My MEL thinks magazines from 1995 are still useful. A video about our heirloom wooden table. Furniture poverty. When you can't afford IKEA, so you call antiques an aesthetic. A video about the family photos. Shrine to failure 4 generations who never left this land. Her following skyrocketed, 25,000, 50,000, then 100,000. Skincare, fashion, and lifestyle brands started reaching out. Everyone wanted to sponsor the influencer who authentically reflects the real America. One night, I overheard Simone talking to Malik, thinking I was asleep. "This is a gold mine for content poor farm life aesthetic is trending." Malik tried to stay calm. "Simone, my mom built something here. This farm means something to her." "Built what?" Simone laughed. "A monument against progress? Your mom is stuck in 1950 and she's dragging us down with her." I stood behind the door, listening to every word, each one a colder cut than the last. But I still stayed silent, because I had a reason. And in that silence, something else was taking shape. Simone thought she was climbing higher by tearing my family down. But she had no idea. The higher she climbed on cruelty, the harder the fall would be. I was simply waiting for the right moment, the perfect moment, to show her a lesson life would never give her a second chance, to relearn Simone had no idea that I, too, was building something. Not a farm, not a brand, but a lesson she would never forget. To fully understand this story, you need to know the truth about the Radford family. Ernest and Claudia Radford once owned a small vineyard in Georgia, but in 2008, when the market collapsed and the bank repossessed the loan they could no longer pay, their entire livelihood vanished overnight. From a family with land, a trade, and pride, they fell straight into the pit of bankruptcy, losing everything. By 2021, when Simone and Malik were preparing to marry, Ernest was 58, Claudia 56. They were living in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta, surviving on part-time jobs with unstable income. One afternoon, Malik told me, "Mom, Simone's parents are struggling. I'm worried about them." I remembered Thomas's words, the words he repeated for over 40 years of our life together. "When you have the ability to help, you help, but do it humbly." And I did have the ability. In 2019, I quietly purchased the Chattahoochee Ridge Country Club, a high-end club outside Atlanta. I bought it through a subsidiary, discreetly enough that even members of the board had no idea I was the actual owner. I called the club manager, Michael Stevens. "Michael, I need 2 good employees, one for groundskeeping, one for catering. I have 2 candidates." "Yes, ma'am." "Their information?" "Ernest and Claudia Radford, interview them normally. Don't let them know who recommended them." And so Ernest was hired as a groundskeeper, earning $58,000 a year. Claudia joined the catering department, earning $44,000. Both had insurance, benefits, paid leave, things they never thought they'd have again. They thought fate had opened a door for them. But in truth, that door was named Harriet Dunley. There are things people never know because you don't want to boast, don't need to explain. I didn't need their gratitude. I just wanted them steady, so Malik wouldn't worry. But the bitter irony was this. The very family I quietly supported was the same family whose daughter mocked me on TikTok every single day, and that, sooner or later, was going to come with a price. But I didn't stop there. Claudia's mother, Miss Bernice Radford, 81, needed professional care. A good nursing home in Atlanta costs $3,200 a month, far beyond anything the family could afford. Since 2015, I had established the Anderson Family Foundation, a small fund to support elderly people in hardship. I quietly instructed the foundation to cover all of Miss Bernice's expenses at Peachtree Senior Haven. One of the best nursing homes in the city, the Radford family believed she'd been accepted into a statewide assistance program. They had no idea that every last dollar came from the woman their daughter called that washed-up farm hag on TikTok 3 years. For 3 years, I quietly supported Simone's entire family. Ernest and Claudia's salaries, $306,000, Miss Bernice's care, $115,200. Total, $421,200. Simone's entire family, from her parents to her grandmother, survived on my money, and not a single one of them knew. Thomas used to say, "The value of wealth isn't in what you can buy. It's in who you can help without signing your name." I lived by that for 3 years, but kindness, no matter how big, still has its limits. And Simone was about to cross that limit in a way she could never come back from. August 2024. The Alabama summer was scorching, but nothing burned as hot as the anger boiling in my chest as I watched Simone's latest video Saturday afternoon. I sat in my room, the window opening onto the fields Thomas and I had worked our whole lives. My phone buzzed. A message from Margaret Williams, the kind woman I knew from the charity board. "Harriet, you need to see this. I'm so sorry." A TikTok link. I tapped it. The first frame made my heart seize. Simone stood in our living room, the room Thomas and I repainted ourselves in 1985, where we'd celebrated Christmas as a family, where Malik first learned to crawl. The afternoon light poured in through the window, turning everything into the artistic backdrop for her content. What enraged me wasn't that she was filming. It was the look in her eyes. Contempt, disguised with a thin layer of fake concern. "Y'all," she began, voice theatrically serious, "I've been documenting generational poverty for months now, but today I want to talk about something deeper." She paused, letting the silence sit. I knew this trick. She'd once told Malik, "If you pause, engagement goes up." About poverty mindset, Simone went on. About the mindset that traps an entire family, about how one generation can lock the next into a loop of failure. She walked around the room, the camera tracking her. Stopping at the fireplace, she held up our wedding photo, taken in 1975. Thomas and I young and full of faith in the future. This is my mother-in-law, Harriet Dunley, 49 years ago. And guess what? She's still living exactly like this same house, same furniture, same life she refuses to change. The camera slid over to the sofa. This couch? 1982? Simone said. She's so proud of it. Still good as new, she says. Look at it. Permanently dented cushions, faded fabric. This is not vintage. This is inability to let go. My hands shook. That couch. Thomas and I had saved for 6 months to buy it. It was the first brand new piece of furniture we'd ever owned, not secondhand. Thomas had been as happy as a child when it arrived. And this rug, Simone pointed the camera down. 1985. She remembers the exact day it was rolled out like it's some golden memory. Then she mocked my voice. July 15th, 1985. Such a beautiful day. Simone gave a cold little laugh. Look at it now. Stained, frayed, bare patches where the wood shows through. This isn't frugality. This is emotional hoarding. She moved to the bookshelf, and that was when the video turned truly cruel. Y'all see this? Simone held up a simple wooden frame. Inside it was Thomas's Purple Heart, the medal he'd received after the Vietnam War. My father-in-law's war medal in a cheap frame, she said. I looked it up on Amazon, $7.99. I had to pause the video. My hand could barely hold the phone. Thomas received that medal after dragging 3 fellow soldiers out of an ambush. He'd spent 3 months in a hospital. For the rest of his life, he rarely talked about the war. Too many nightmares. The Purple Heart was the one thing he kept, a reminder of the lives he'd saved. And now Simone, the girl I'd welcomed into my home, whose family I had quietly supported for 3 years, was turning it into some cheap prop in a video. I took a deep breath and forced myself to hit play again. Simone opened the kitchen cabinets. The camera zoomed in on all the generic store-brand labels. This is the pantry, she said. Everything is store-brand. Not because they can't afford better, but because my mother-in-law believes spending money is a sin. She held up a box of store-brand cereal. She taught Malik from childhood, we don't need expensive things to be happy. Sounds noble, right? But that's code for, we deserve to be poor. Tears spilled down my face. Thomas and I had never taught Malik that he deserved to be poor. We taught him about value, not self-neglect, that money doesn't measure your worth, that kindness, honor, and family matter more than material things. Simone had twisted those lessons into something warped and sick. The end of the video was the cruelest part. Simone sat on the shameful old sofa, staring into the camera, her eyes glistening with the kind of tears I knew were rehearsed. I love Malik, she said, voice trembling exactly the way the books say it should. But when I look at him, I see what poverty mindset has done to him. She listed it out. His engineering degree from the University of Georgia, his $75,000 a year salary. But he says things like, we don't need a bigger apartment. This car still runs fine. Why go on fancy vacations? And I realized my mother-in-law programmed him to think small, to accept mediocrity. Simone stood up, staring out at the fields through the window. This farm represents 4 generations of Dunley men who never left, never reached for anything bigger, never asked if there might be a better way to live. Her voice turned cold. And Harriet Dunley wants Malik to be just like them. She wants him to inherit this farm, live in this house, repeat the poverty loop. She turned back to the camera. But I won't let that happen. I won't let my children grow up thinking ambition is wrong, that wanting more is greedy, that struggling is noble. Then came the inspirational smile. Yes, we're going to sell the farm. Yes, we're moving somewhere with real opportunity. And yes, I'll keep documenting this journey. Because someone needs to tell young women, you don't have to accept the life you were born into. You can break the cycle. You deserve more. The video ended with her walking toward the BMW, Hermes bag swinging, followed by a string of her usual hashtags. The screen went dark. My room was absolutely silent. That night, I sat in the small room that had held my entire life. The sunset spilled over the photo of Thomas in uniform, his face still young, not yet worn down by life. I asked myself, where did we go wrong, Thomas? But somewhere deep inside, I knew we hadn't gone wrong. We had simply been born into a different time. Simone was the perfect product of a different era, a world where everything, even your own family, can be turned into content. And at that point, I still didn't know. The next blow wouldn't come from TikTok. It would come from my own heart. Once I calmed down, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the comments. The video already had millions of views, tens of thousands of shares. Half of them questioned Simone. This girl's wearing dresses worth thousands and calling her in-laws poor. Something's off. If they're that poor, how does she afford that car? From the house and the stuff, they look more middle class than poor. But the other half cut straight into me. Stay strong, girl. Generational poverty is real. Your husband needs therapy to deprogram that toxic mindset. Your MIL is emotionally manipulating you with so-called values. One comment had thousands of likes. My MIL is the same, lives in the past, makes everyone feel guilty for wanting better. That's emotional abuse dressed up as family values. I'm happy you had the courage to get out. Over 2,000 people agreed. Over 2,000 people believed I was abusing my son and daughter-in-law. I didn't tell Malik right away. I needed time. And I heard Thomas's voice in my head again. When someone attacks you, don't react right away. Sit down. Think. Plan. The winner isn't the one who reacts fastest. It's the one who thinks deepest. That night, I went into Thomas's secret office. I opened file after file. Ernest and Claudia's employment contracts, the foundation papers covering Miss Bernice's care, the ownership documents for the country club. Everything was documented clearly. Every line could become evidence. In my mind, a plan began to come together. But before I could act, my heart decided to strike first September 12th, 2024, 3 days before surgery. I was in the barn, checking equipment. The weather was so beautiful that 10 years earlier, Thomas would have dragged me out to walk the fields and talk about next year's crops. The chest pain hit suddenly, like a boulder slamming down on my ribs. My breath came in gasps. My hands went numb. I knew the signs. I'd been ignoring them for months. Not now, too much to do, I kept telling myself. But hearts don't wait. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Malik's face was ashen. Mom, you scared me half to death. I'm fine, son, I whispered. No, you're not. You had a heart attack. The doctors say you need surgery immediately. I glanced around the room. Machines, harsh lights, the smell of antiseptic. And in the corner, small as if trying to disappear, was Simone. Our eyes met for one brief second. Not worry, not fear, but calculation. The surgery was scheduled for September 15th. 3 days for me to put my affairs and my will in order in case I didn't make it. Malik barely left my bedside. Simone stayed glued to her phone, typing, scrolling, adjusting angles. I could only assume she was leveraging her mother-in-law's health crisis for content. The night before the surgery, Simone went home to grab some things, leaving just Malik and me. Son, I said, I need you to promise me one thing. Anything, Mom. If anything happens to me, don't let Simone sell the farm. At least not until you understand what it's truly worth. Malik frowned. You mean the money, Mom? I mean the value. Not everything is what it looks like. I don't understand, but if you want me to promise, I promise. The surgery went on longer and got more complicated than anyone expected. The doctors later told me there was a moment they thought they'd lost me. My heart stopped beating for nearly 2 minutes. Malik waited in the hallway, nearly falling apart. And Simone? I assumed she was terrified, until a nurse named Dorothy, who'd worked there for 30 years, told me, "Mrs. Dunley, I shouldn't say this, but your daughter-in-law, while you were in surgery, she was filming TikToks. She talked about day 3 of being free from the farm, about how you finally passed out so they could talk about upgrading their lives." That was when I knew the plan I'd been forming was no longer optional. It was necessary. I asked Dorothy, "If there's a call later about property, about my assets, please put it on speaker and keep it near me, and if you can, record it." Dorothy nodded, her eyes sad but resolute. "You really believe your daughter-in-law will go that far?" "I don't believe. I've heard her go that far too many times already." 3 days later, everything unfolded exactly as I'd predicted. Malik went home to shower. Simone thought I was asleep. My phone rang. Dorothy quietly picked it up, turned on speaker, and set it by my bed. A small recorder lay right beside it. Simone's voice drifted in from the hallway, every word crystal clear. "Hi, this is Simone Radford Dunley, calling about the property listings we discussed earlier. Yes, the 200-acre farm in Opelika. My mother-in-law is currently unconscious after complications from heart surgery. The doctors aren't sure about her prognosis. We need to move fast." My entire body went cold. She talked about sale price, about how the neighbors would thank them for getting rid of that eyesore, about a small window of time before I recovered, about how Malik was easily influenced right now because he's emotional. Every sentence, every word, Dorothy captured it all. When the call ended, the room felt like stone. Dorothy turned to me, eyes brimming. "Mrs. Harriet, I'm so sorry you had to hear that." I stared at the ceiling and heard Thomas's voice again. "Give people enough rope, Harriet. The good ones will use it to climb. The others will hang themselves." Simone had just tied her own rope, and now I had everything I needed to teach her a lesson she would never forget for as long as she lived. September 15th, 2024. My heart had been warning me for months, but I kept putting off a checkup. There was always too much to handle, too many things I felt I had to shoulder alone. The surgery lasted 6 long hours, dangerous ones. There were moments the doctors thought they had lost me, but I survived. When I opened my eyes in recovery, the first thing I saw was not the ceiling, not the IV tubing, but Simone, sitting in the corner, leaning over her phone, filming a TikTok. "Day 3 of freedom from the farm," she whispered into the camera, her lips curling into a smile. "Harriet's finally unconscious, so we can talk about upgrading our lives." I lay still, breathing evenly, letting her believe I wasn't awake yet. In that moment, I understood something cold and undeniable. To Simone, her mother-in-law's heart surgery wasn't a family crisis. It was content. And anyone who can turn another person's life or death moment into a TikTok backdrop will eventually slip and reveal exactly who they are. 3 days later, I was still in my hospital bed, my body weak, but my mind sharper than ever. Malik ran back and forth between home and the hospital. Simone, meanwhile, disappeared from the room constantly to handle calls, as she put it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed, a call forwarded from my asset management company. The name flashing on the screen made my pulse shift instantly. From the hallway, amplified through speakerphone, Simone's voice rang out. "Hello, this is Simone Radford Dunley, calling about the property listings we discussed." My blood went cold. "Yes, the 200-acre farm in Opelika," she continued, sounding polished, businesslike, as if she were negotiating an investment deal. "My mother-in-law is currently unconscious, heart surgery complications. We need to move quickly before she can interfere." I reached for the phone on the bedside table, pressed the record button, then closed my eyes again, pretending to sleep. "The asking price," Simone went on. Oh, the appraiser said $920,000 for everything. Land, house, outbuildings. I know it sounds a little low, but honestly, the place represents everything outdated about America. The broker asked something about me. Simone didn't hesitate. Harriet Dunley? She's 67. Absolutely no business sense. She's been farming for over 40 years, like it's still 1950. No modernization, no efficiency. She still writes her bookkeeping by hand. Can you believe that? I heard her heels clicking against the hospital floor as she paced, talking and walking at the same time. Listen, just between us, I'm doing the town a favor by letting this place be redeveloped. The community needs progress, not some stubborn old woman's farm museum. Then she said the line, the one that erased every last inch of doubt about her true intentions. And honestly, at her age, with her health like this, she probably won't be able to make decisions much longer anyway. The call went on for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Simone talking about my life, as if it were a piece of scrap blocking her path. Every insult, every dismissal, every condescending remark was recorded perfectly on my phone. When she finished and walked back into the room with that carefully curated, dutiful daughter-in-law caring for her sick Emile posture, I lay still, staring up at the ceiling, and smiling to myself. Simone Radford Dunley had just officially declared war on the wrong woman. And she had no idea that with that single phone call, she had activated everything waiting for her on the other side. September 23rd. I was discharged that morning, doing my best to play the role of a fragile old woman who needed help with every step Malik cared for me, as if I might shatter at any moment. And Simone, from the hospital door to the parking lot, barely lifted her eyes from her phone. "You don't need to do anything today, Mom," Malik said as he helped me into the car. "The realtor is coming at 2, but you just rest. Don't worry about anything." I smiled. "Don't worry, son. I'm just going to make a few calls, check on some old friends." For the first time all day, Simone looked directly at me. "Please don't embarrass us in front of the realtor. This is important." "I understand," I replied. What she didn't understand was that those calls were about to turn her life upside down. That evening, when everything was quiet, I realized, if truth is sunlight, then Simone had been standing in the shadows far too long. She thought she controlled the story, thought she was about to win, but all it takes is one open door, just one, for every mask to fall. And that door was in my basement. That night, I asked Malik to come downstairs. The place Simone never stepped into because she claimed it was damp, dark, and creepy. "Son," I said, "I need to show you something." I led him behind the old wine shelf. There was a small door only Thomas and I ever knew about. I unlocked it. The lights flicked on, revealing Thomas's secret office, untouched since the day he died. The oak desk, the thick file cabinets, the old computer still locked with the password only I knew. Malik froze. "Mom, I didn't know this room even existed." "Your father didn't want anyone to know," I said softly. "This is where he handled everything." I turned on the computer, typed the password. Dozens of documents, spreadsheets, and investment summaries appeared. "Malik," I asked gently, "how much do you think our family has?" Malik blinked. "I don't know. I always thought we lived comfortably. Not rich, but enough." I opened a file titled Investment Portfolio Summary, 2024. Within seconds, I heard the scrape of a chair. Malik sank into it, looking as if his knees had given out. "Mom, this says $52 million? 52.4, I corrected. "As of last year. It might be a bit higher now." Malik stared at me like he was meeting a stranger. How is this possible?" I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father and I worked for 45 years. Every dollar we earned went back into building. Real estate, organic agriculture, stocks, bonds. We didn't live luxuriously because we were preparing for this very moment. I opened another file. Dunley Organic Farms, monthly revenue, 285,000 Dunley properties, 23 rental units, total value over $14 million. Chattahoochee Ridge Country Club. Your father bought it in 2019. Malik's eyes widened. Wait, you own Chattahoochee Ridge Country Club? Correct, I nodded. Where Simone's parents work. Malik's face drained of color. So, Simone's parents work for you? They have for 3 years, I said. They don't know. Everything goes through management. I opened yet another file. Anderson Family Foundation, the one covering her grandmother's care at Peachtree Senior Haven. $3,200 a month. 48 months. Total, $153,600. Malik clutched his head. Mom, you've been supporting Simone's entire family all this time? I only did what your father and I believed was right. No need for them to know. No need for gratitude. Malik began pacing, breath uneven. And Simone has been... I nodded. She called me a washed-up farm hag in front of 2.3 million people. She tried to sell the farm while I was in recovery. She told the realtor I probably wouldn't be able to make decisions much longer. I hit play on the audio recording. Simone's voice filled the small room. Harriet Dunley? She's 67. Absolutely no business sense. Malik listened from beginning to end, and with each sentence, his face shifted, shock to anger, to jaw tightening to collapsing into the chair. When the recording ended, the room went utterly still. Finally, Malik spoke, his voice cracked, but steady. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. I shook my head. Son, you love your wife. There's nothing wrong with that. But love doesn't mean being blind to disrespect. Malik inhaled deeply, then stood upright. I know what I have to do. I'm with you, Mom. Always. I cupped his face in my hands and smiled for the first time in days. Your father would be proud of you. Malik squeezed my hand. What do we do now, Mom? I looked at the glowing screen in front of us and answered slowly. Now. We let Simone keep digging the hole she's digging, and when it's deep enough, I smiled, we'll show her just how far she has to climb. Chattahoochee Ridge Country Club hosts an annual charity gala, one of the biggest social events in the entire region. 350 guests, $850 per ticket. A silent auction featuring jewelry, luxury vacations, fine art, rare wines. And every year, the Anderson Family Foundation is the event's largest sponsor. $100,000, Simone registered 3 weeks ago. She eagerly flaunted it all over Instagram. Finally going to a high-class event, exactly where I belong. The only thing she didn't know was this. That high-class event was sponsored by the very same washed-up farm hag she mocked every day. I realized this was the perfect stage. Simone wanted the spotlight? Fine, I would turn on the brightest light. She just didn't know that when the light hits. The mask is always the first thing to fall. I spent the entire next week preparing. Not dresses, not jewelry. I cared nothing about those. I prepared documents. Every ownership certificate, every employment contract of Ernest and Claudia, every receipt for Simone's grandmother's long-term care, every screenshot of Simone mocking my family in front of millions, all printed, organized neatly inside a black leather briefcase, the only thing I planned to bring to the gala. I called my attorney, Patricia Chen. Patricia, I need you at the gala on October 12th, and bring all the contract termination documents. On the other end of the line, Patricia went quiet for a few seconds. Mrs. Dunley, are you certain? This will be a very public action. I'm completely certain. Simone wants social media attention. I'll give her exactly that, just not in the way she expects. 2 days before the gala, on October 10th, I called Michael Stevens, the club manager. Michael, I want to announce some personnel changes during the gala. Ma'am, we typically don't address staffing matters in front of the entire ballroom. This time it will be public, I said slowly. Prepare the projector in the main hall. I'll be giving a presentation. Michael hesitated. Ma'am, what exactly are you planning? I looked at the thick stack of files on my desk and replied in a calm but firm voice, I'm planning to teach someone a lesson about respect. October 12th, 2024. The night everything changed. Simone spent the entire day getting ready. Hair, $400. Professional makeup, $300. Valentino gown, $3,400. Jimmy Choo heels, $890. And naturally, she recorded every step on Instagram stories. Tonight, I finally get to be around my people. No more pretending to blend in with those small-town values. I watched each story, then simply smiled. That night, I put on a simple black dress from Dillard's, $150, my decade-old shoes that were still holding strong, and nothing except the wedding ring Thomas had given me back in 1975. Malik picked me up at 6:30. Are you sure about this, Mom? He asked. More sure than I've ever been, son. We drove my old F-150 to the club. I wanted Simone not only to see me, but to remember this night for the rest of her life. Simone believed tonight's gala was the beginning of her new life in the upper class. But what she didn't know was that tonight would also be the only time in her life the spotlight would truly shine on her, and not in the way she imagined. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, pure white tablecloths, fresh flowers, a string quartet playing soft classical pieces. Simone and Malik arrived at 7:15 in her BMW. From the bar, I watched her make her grand entrance, confident, luminous, moving as if the lights had been waiting just for her. She immediately started introducing herself to the city's elite. Hi, I'm Simone Radford Dunley, I heard her say to Margaret Williams, the banker's wife. My family just joined the club's social circle. Margaret smiled politely. Dunley? I know that name. Your family has been incredibly generous with our charity events. Simone froze for half a second. Oh, must be a different Dunley family. We only recently began donating. I nearly laughed. Margaret was referring to me. She had no idea Simone was my daughter-in-law. At 8 o'clock, the program began. Richard Taylor, the club president, stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual charity gala tonight. We've raised over $480,000 for the local food bank and educational programs. Applause erupted. Simone clapped enthusiastically, probably imagining her next TikTok caption, as is tradition for the past 6 years, Richard continued. Our platinum sponsor, contributing $100,000, is the Anderson Family Foundation. Simone looked around, confused, but I knew exactly what was coming. And as always, Richard said, I invite Mrs. Harriet Dunley to give tonight's remarks. The entire room fell silent. I stood up. Simone's champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. I walked to the podium, my leather briefcase in hand. Good evening, I began slowly. For those who don't know me, I'm Harriet Dunley. I own a small farm outside town, 200 acres of corn and soybeans, a very outdated operation, according to certain people. A ripple of murmurs spread. Tonight, I'd like to clear up a few misunderstandings about rural poverty. I looked straight at Simone, because my daughter-in-law has kindly spoken on my behalf quite extensively. Ernest and Claudia Radford, seated among the staff, looked confused and terrified. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first document. This is the ownership certificate for Chattahoochee Ridge Country Club, purchased in 2019 for $3.2 million by Dunley Holdings, LLC. A wave of whispers surged through the room. I say this because some good employees here never actually knew who was signing their paychecks. I held up 2 contracts. Ernest Radford, groundskeeper Claudia Radford, catering manager, combined salary $102,000 per year. Claudia covered her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. I took out the next file. Miss Bernice Radford, Peachtree Senior Haven Nursing Home. Support, $3,200 per month, 48 months. Total, $153,600. Simone practically collapsed into her chair. You may wonder, I continued, why I'm sharing all this publicly. Charity is usually a private matter. I connected my phone to the projector. Unfortunately, some people who benefit from our kindness choose to publicly mock it. Screenshots of Simone's TikTok flashed on the giant screen. Farm Poverty Museum. The room gasped. Then video after video appeared. Every insult. Washed up farm hag, generational poverty, America's backward museum. All of this, I said, was created by the person whose entire family has survived on our money for the past 3 years. You could hear a pin drop. I continued, this is the actual financial status of the Dunley family. The screen switched to Dunley Organic Farms, Dunley Properties, Dunley Holdings. 23 rental properties, $14.2 million. Agricultural revenue, $38 million monthly income, $285,000. Total net worth, $52.4 million. Richard Taylor rose to his feet. Harriet, I had no idea you... That's the point. Richard Real Wealth doesn't need announcements. It just runs quietly until someone attacks the family behind it. I turned back to Simone. You wanted 2 million people to watch your journey toward progress? Fine. Tonight, they'll see something else. That arrogance is free, but consequences are very, very expensive. I pulled out the final set of papers. Termination notices for Ernest and Claudia Radford, effective Monday morning. Nursing home sponsorship ends on October 31st. The apartment lease, revoked for violating community standards. Claudia burst into tears. Ernest sank in his chair. Simone staggered to her feet, mascara streaking down her face. Mrs. Harriet, please, I didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked, I said. You judged, mocked, and broadcasted it for the world to laugh at our family. I'll delete everything. I'll apologize. Please, don't do this to my parents. I lifted my glass. Simone, 3 years ago, I helped your parents, quietly, expecting nothing. But I have never, and will never, pay someone who insults me on the internet. Simone fled the ballroom. Her heels clattered across the marble floor like nails, sealing the coffin of her high-class fantasy. The doors shut behind her. The room remained silent for a few breaths. Then Richard Taylor began to clap. Margaret Williams joined. One by one, the entire ballroom rose for a standing ovation. Applause echoing for 3 long minutes. 3 minutes. Just enough time to bury an entire TikTok empire. And enough time for Simone to understand one truth. Not everyone's kindness is yours to toy with. 3 days after the gala, Opelika felt like an entirely different town. The story spread faster than fire meeting wind. The local paper ran a headline, Influencers' Farm-Shaming Campaign Backfires Disastrously. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution published a full feature on Hidden Wealth Buried Beneath the Dust of the American South. 3 TV stations called asking for interviews. I declined them all. I didn't do this for fame, I told Malik when he asked. I did it because there are lessons you can only learn when the truth stands naked. While the public roared outside, I realized something very clearly. The storm out there was nothing compared to the storm about to sweep straight into the Radford family, and they had no idea what I was going to do next. That Friday morning, I saw Ernest and Claudia's old Honda pull into my driveway. They stepped out, exhausted, anxious, aged by 10 years in just 3 days. I opened the door before they could knock. Mrs. Dunley, Ernest said, his voice trembling, may we talk to you? Come in. They sat at the kitchen table, the very table Simone mocked in her videos, calling it furniture poverty. The moment Claudia sat down, she burst into tears. We didn't know, she cried. "We swear to God, we didn't know Simone was doing any of that." "I know," I said softly. "I know you didn't." "We tried to raise her right," Ernest said, eyes red. "To respect people, to be grateful. But after we lost the vineyard in 2008, she changed, became bitter, obsessed with escaping poverty." I poured them coffee, the same simple morning ritual Simone once mocked. "You are good people," I said. "Hard-working, kind. That's why I hired you in the first place." Claudia lowered her head. "But now we've lost our jobs. And my mother." "Miss Bernice will be all right," I said immediately. "I've arranged her care through another charity fund, one Simone will never know exists." Ernest froze. You're still helping us?" "I punish behavior, not families," I replied. "Thomas, my husband, always taught me that." I placed my hand on the table. "If you want, I have new jobs for both of you. Not at the club, that would be too uncomfortable. But I own other properties that need management. Same salary, same benefits." Claudia broke into louder sobs, the kind that hold relief and shame tangled together. "Why would you be this kind after what our daughter did?" "Because you are not Simone," I said, "and because everyone deserves a second chance." By dusk, Malik stepped onto the front porch, the very place Thomas and I once sat watching sunset roll across the fields. "Mom, Simone and I talked. Are you thinking about divorce?" I asked bluntly. I don't know." He exhaled shakily. "She wants counseling, says she can change." I looked at my son, my child, now a man caught between loyalty and betrayal. "Malik," I said gently, "you already know the answer in your heart. You're just not ready to admit it." "I love her, Mom." "You love the version of her that you thought she was," I replied. "But real love requires respect, and Simone has shown she doesn't respect you, doesn't respect your family, and doesn't respect the values that raised you." Malik stared at his hands. "What would Dad do in this situation, Mom?" I smiled, my heart tightening all at once. "Oh, Thomas?" He'd say, "Malik, life's too short to stay with someone who makes you smaller. Find the one who helps you grow." Malik let out a laugh, one part pain, one part release. "I miss Dad." "I do too," I said. "Every single day." April 2025. I sat in Thomas's office, the once secret room that had now become the place where Malik and I jointly managed all of Dunley Organic Farms. We were reviewing the draft for next season's expansion plan. "Mom, I've got news," Malik said, lifting his eyes from the laptop. "Good or bad?" "That depends on how you look at it." He inhaled deeply. Simone deleted all her social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, everything. Gone. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "She enrolled back at the University of Georgia Agricultural Business Program." I froze for a beat. "That's real?" Malik nodded. "She sent me a message. Said she doesn't expect me to respond. She just wanted me to know she's trying to understand, trying to learn." "Do you believe her?" Malik thought for a long moment. Maybe the gala hit her harder than she expected. Or maybe she finally hit rock bottom and now she's trying to climb out. He paused. "Maybe both." I placed my hand on my son's shoulder. "You still love her, don't you?" "I do," Malik exhaled. "But I can't go back. Not after everything, Mom." "That's the right decision," I said softly. "This time, you chose yourself." But what stayed with me for days afterward wasn't Simone. It was the feeling that one door had closed, and another, bigger, quieter, more peaceful, was opening for both of us. The rest of my life, perhaps, was finally beginning. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. No sender's name, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Dear Mrs. Harriet, I know I have no right to write this. I know nothing I say can fix what I've done. But I want you to know, These past 6 months, I've replayed every word I said, every video I posted, and I am ashamed. I read the entire letter in silence, every line a cut, but this time not because it hurt, but because perhaps she finally saw herself clearly. Simone wrote about the difference between having money and being truly wealthy, about how real wealth isn't for showing off, about how Thomas and I had helped her family quietly. She ended with one line, "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But you taught me a lesson I will never forget." I folded the letter, set it on the desk, and looked out at the open fields, the same land Thomas and I had tended for nearly 45 years. Maybe she would change. Maybe she wouldn't. Time would tell. But it was no longer my story to follow. That night, I took my usual walk through the farm, a habit I'd kept since Thomas passed. I stopped by the big oak tree where his ashes were scattered. A soft breeze rustled the leaves. "You know, Thomas," I said, "you always taught me the right lessons. Hide your wealth, help quietly, and let people's behavior speak for who they are." A stronger gust blew through, almost like he was nodding. And I think I taught Simone something too. Not sure how deeply she understood it, but at least I tried. I sat on the wooden bench, the one Thomas built for our 40th anniversary. "You know what hurt the most?" I whispered. Not the things she said about me, but realizing I failed to teach my daughter-in-law the values we taught Malik. I looked toward the farmhouse, warm lights glowing, a curl of smoke rising from the chimney, every detail carrying the breath of a home that's been loved. But maybe that's not my failure, I sighed. Some people can only learn by falling. When I returned to the porch, Malik was sitting there, exactly like his father used to, quietly watching the sunset slide behind the trees. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, taking a seat beside him. "Dad," Malik said, "about what he built, what he taught me. And I want to do the same. Not just continue his work, but expand it, help more families, create more opportunities." I smiled, warmth rising in my chest. "Thomas would be proud of you." Malik turned to me. "Mom, do you regret what you did to Simone?" I stayed quiet for a moment, truly thinking. "No," I finally said. "I don't regret teaching her a lesson about respect." Then I exhaled softly. "But I do hope she learned something from it." "I hope so too." We sat there without another word, watching the last light of the day slowly sink. And in that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. Real wealth isn't what you show. It's what you build quietly. Not for applause, not for praise, but to leave something lasting for the people you love. That is generational wealth. And no TikTok video can take that away. Wealth doesn't come from designer brands or fame. It comes from what you build and who you build it for. Character isn't what you post online. It's how you treat people when no one is watching. Respect can't be bought. It has to be earned by living according to your values. That is the lesson of Harriet Dunley, and it is a lesson for all of us.